So there's a pretty big controversy going on with Spotify and Joe Rogan right now. If you don't know who Joe Rogan is, I'm kind of surprised because you're on the internet, especially on YouTube. He is basically the king of podcasting. The Joe Rogan Experience is such a huge podcast at this point that it legitimately rivals like cable television and radio, I would say. I mean, I would think daily more people probably listen to Joe Rogan's podcast than they do most of like the major radio stations and things like that. I mean, it really is at a point where it's that big. The internet has gotten to a point where people filming things in their bedroom or in a studio, literally just talking about whatever, have the ability to actually outperform like mainstream outlets. Joe Rogan has kind of helped pioneer podcasting to a certain extent. The amount of different people that he's had on his show, the reputation of these people too, is absolutely incredible. He's gotten so big that they legitimately were trying to get one of the presidential debates to be hosted and moderated by Joe Rogan. That's pretty much how big his show has become at this point. And another testament to how big the show has become is the fact that he signed an exclusivity deal with Spotify earlier this year worth $100 million. I mean, that's an insane check to pull from a podcast. I mean, we're talking like NBA Supermax contract money starting to come into fruition for people who really are at the top of their game with, podcasts. And even to a certain extent, like Twitch streaming and things like that, you can make tens of millions of dollars in these kinds of deals. Now, the problem with this $100 million deal that he signed with Spotify is that it has caused a massive controversy within the company itself. Now, a lot of the time when you see a controversy like this, it comes from viewership or people who consume it to some degree, right? It's not usually the employees of a company that is now hosting this podcast that you will see this kind of backlash from, which is what makes this such a unique situation. And the fact that Joe Rogan has gotten this huge payday really also kind of throws a lot of wrenches into this whole problem. So as of right now, a few weeks ago especially, it was starting to be reported that there were a number of Spotify employees that were threatening a labor strike if Spotify didn't start to give the employees editorial oversight over Joe Rogan's podcast. And this was apparently due to an episode in which Joe Rogan interviewed Abigail Schreier. I'm not necessarily sure who this person is, to be honest with you. He's had so many different people on that it's just really hard to keep track of who's who. Now, this episode apparently was deemed transphobic by many of the LGBTQ plus employees at Spotify because I guess I don't know what it is about this name, but I can't say it. Abigail Schreier apparently started to question whether or not young women should be going through gender transition operations or treatments or therapies, basically taking hormone supplements, having gender reassignment surgeries and things like that at an extremely young age. And then also made the question on whether or not, how many of these women, I guess, are actually transgender, or how many of them simply just want acceptance from society, basically getting cool points because the LGBTQ movement has exploded in the last decade or so. Now, like I said, a bunch of the employees at Spotify deemed this to be transphobic and then started to demand changes in more than apparently 10 separate meetings with upper management at Spotify. Now, apparently the direct editorial oversight that these employees were demanding included being able to directly edit or remove sections of any upcoming interviews or to even block the uploading of episodes that they deemed problematic. They also demanded the ability to add trigger warnings, corrections, and references to fact-checked articles on topics that were discussed by Joe Rogan on his episodes. Now, Joe Rogan has responded to this entire situation saying that basically nothing has ever been said to him about this situation, and it never really came up until now, and apparently he still doesn't really understand the full context of the situation. He claims that the episode in question was not transphobic and that the people being mad about this are wrong. And I think Joe Rogan actually made a pretty decent point with what he said. He said, these employees are mad about one episode of his podcast where one of the guests, had an opinion that they disagreed with or whatever, and yet a lot of the musical lyrics in songs on Spotify are absolutely downright fucking foul. Now, I'm a huge rap fan, I'll go ahead and say it, but some of the things that's said in rap are definitely out there, and when you compare it to some of the shit that's said on Joe Rogan's podcast, it's just as bad, if not worse, in the grand scheme of things. I mean, he then went on to say, quote, "I get it, you're a 23-year-old woke kid and you're working for this company and you think you're gonna put your foot down, I get it." So, It doesn't really seem like Joe Rogan is backing down on this point, and it seems like Spotify, at least the upper management, is kind of siding with Joe Rogan, apparently, considering the fact that, number one, there's apparently been like 10 plus meetings with these employees that are threatening a strike, and as of now, nothing has come from this whole situation. And number two, the contract seems to be in Joe's favor to begin with. Now, a massive point of contention when Joe Rogan announced his deal with Spotify was whether or not Spotify was going to have any oversight with the show. Was Spotify going to be able to tell Joe what he can and can't say, what guests he can and can't have on his show? Would there be episodes that were censored or downright blocked from being uploaded? So this was kind of a question from the jump. But according to Joe Rogan, the deal basically was put together in a way that basically allowed him and his team to completely keep creative control over the show. Meaning that Spotify basically couldn't step in and be like, hey, you can't say that, hey, you can't do that, whatnot. Basically, from what it seems at least, the big part of the deal was the fact that Joe Rogan's show would not change. And a lot of people criticize the Joe Rogan experience for this, but I actually think that this might be a good thing, in all honesty. Joe Rogan has been known for having people from basically all sides of the discussion on his show. He's had people from Bernie Sanders and Elon Musk to, Ben Shapiro's, Jordan Peterson's, all kinds of different people, and of course, their opinions are going to vary. And a big part of the Joe Rogan Experience show is the fact that it's not really tamed down, and maybe an uncomfortable discussion is going to be had, even if that means that it upsets people, you know what I'm saying? Even if that means that the discussion maybe isn't 100% accurate. As a matter of fact, I believe recently Joe Rogan got in a little bit of heat for some false comments that he had made in an uneducated moment about wildfires on the west coast of the United States. But that's a part of the show, you know what I'm saying? And even if you disagree with him, or maybe there's facts and evidence that go against what's being said, people still have their right to their opinion. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that these employees, who, by the way, hold virtually, if any, ownership of the company, think that they're going to step in and be able to, make a $100 million deal different after the lawyers have already gotten this all worked out is insane to me. Like, yeah, you can disagree with Joe Rogan. You can disagree with a lot of the points that he makes, as I do. I agree with him on some things and I disagree with him on others. I think that's part of a healthy discussion. You can't fucking agree with someone all the time on everything they say. But they really don't have the right to step in and do this. Now you're going to say, oh, but if they strike, then, Spotify doesn't have any employees. Well, what's probably going to happen in that instance is Spotify is just going to hire new employees to handle it, because this deal has already been worked out. If Spotify employees had such a big fucking problem with all of this going on, I'm starting to wonder why maybe they didn't step in earlier, and they've now waited weeks after this deal was signed. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one wanted to say anything beforehand. And I mean, for Spotify, it's strictly a business decision. Like, the company probably doesn't agree with everything that Joe Rogan says, but when you have the opportunity to pull in the biggest podcast in the world exclusively to your platform, it's going to be something that you try to do regardless. It's going to be a deal that you approach regardless. It's not like, they say, oh, well, we don't agree with this one episode of Joe Rogan's show that has thousands of episodes that garners millions of views a day without a problem. We can't really work with this guy, you know what I'm saying? As a business, it would have been stupid to not take Joe Rogan's podcast. And at this point, being mad about it now doesn't really make sense, because Joe Rogan already got paid. You know what I'm saying? He's legally now basically obligated to the money that Spotify set aside. The contract is already set up. He's probably gotten a lump sum of it up front. Probably not the whole $100 million, but they probably gave him, 10, 20%, something like that up front. Or if it was like a yearly deal, they split it between the years and whatnot. So, he probably already got some of that money. So at this point, basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to censor and edit a show that they have no creative control over as employees of a company that can easily replace them after the person in question that they're mad at already has gotten paid. You know what I'm saying? This guy has already made tens of millions of dollars off this deal. He's already making all this endorsement money. You're not going to stop him from saying that shit. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to stop him from having controversial guests on his show, because it's Joe Rogan. I mean, if you went to a 30,000 subscriber YouTuber and you made these kinds of threats, that would be a lot different. Joe Rogan is worth an obscene amount of money. You know what I'm saying? He could never make another episode of the Joe Rogan Experience again, and he's still going to be richer than 90 of the average person's generational bloodlines. You know what I'm saying? It's not even close. So, I mean, like, you're not scaring him off the platform. He's not backing down. He's already gotten paid. And at this point, it seems like Spotify is sticking to their guns with this deal, too. So, I'm not really sure how this whole thing's going to end. I mean, maybe they do strike. I don't really see that being successful. And at this point, it seems like contractually Joe Rogan has the right to upload this thing with, the freest, I guess, restrictions possible. So I would think if Spotify suddenly changed their minds, either they would have to get Joe Rogan to agree to it, which I'm sure he wouldn't, or they would basically be breaching their contract. So, I mean, it's a confusing situation. And it seems like a lose-lose for Spotify. Either they're going to get their employees riled up or they're going to have to bite the bullet with Joe Rogan. And it's a bad situation for them to be in, but at the end of the day, they have the biggest podcast in the world on their platform pretty much exclusively, and they need to find a way to work around that. So anyways, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new. Follow me on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. Thank you to my channel members. Your support helps my channel tremendously. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus. Well, not even really listening to the Joe Rogan Experience that much anymore. I used to listen to it a lot more, but I mean, recently it just is kind of, I don't know, I haven't been watching it. And signing out.